Hey all, welcome to another edition of Meteorology Lab. I'm Tim Vasquez, and we roll these opening clips here for me to make sure the video stream is moving through to YouTube okay. And it gives you all something to look at too. But tropical weather here, not as bad as what we had the past couple days, but of course a lot of the action is in Florida this evening. And that's a look at what it looks like outside. Just debris from these tropical thunderstorms that have pushed off to the south. Okay, elsewhere, Florida. They've had some weather today. Supercell moving through the area northwest of Miami. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to look at the boundaries, but when the Terra and Aqua satellites made a pass, they had a lot of that same anvil debris that we were getting here. And I'm bringing up my tools here. Most of what you see here is cirrus and cirrostratus altocumulus just overlying this entire area. The storm we had was in this area right here. But thanks to the miracle of radar, we can actually see that boundary. This was at 5:03 p.m. Eastern, and you can see that boundary right there, just east of Miami, along that causeway, whatever that is, that goes all the way out to Coral Gables, or Coral Springs, I forget, Fort Myers, that's it, yeah. But if we run the animation of this, you'll kind of see that that boundary is stationary. And what you see here, this is some higher, kind of elevated shower activity, but the main boundary just sitting right there. And that was a factor in getting this storm going. And I believe that it's that cell right there. This is at 5:54 p.m. here. And so let's see what happened here. I haven't even looked at this loop myself. Yeah, okay, I think that's the one right there. That one went up on the boundary, and then this other one also went up on the boundary right in this area. And I'm going to load up the set that has the actual supercell activity. So that's going to run from 2239. Let me bring this in here. And we'll run it all the way to about 744 there. So while that's coming in, we'll take a look at some of the surface data here. And Ryan is out there in Florida, and he mentions 1-inch hail in Pembroke Pines, Davie, Southwest Ranches, Plantation, Cooper City, Sunrise. I don't know any of those towns. I do know Plantation is southwest of Fort Lauderdale there. And we'll take a look at the surface map out in that area. Let me change the sector. As far as Texas goes, you can maybe look at this while we have it up. You can see high pressure up to the north. This is what you're going to be looking at when you sit down and look at surface charts. You take a look at the pressure field and see how everything is oriented. And what we see is high pressure to the north. That's a little unusual this time of year. We expect to see high pressure in this area here. So that gives us here a northerly gradient. And that gives us kind of a drying and slight cooling trend this time of year. And as a result, we're not seeing as much shower activity in this part of the country. Shifting over to the Florida area. Now, they are under the influence of the Bermuda High. It's kind of, you can see it out here. We've got 1012 millibar and 1014 off the edge. So you're getting kind of the seasonal southeasterly flow through that area. But we do have strong winds aloft. At least I think we do. I'm going to have to check. Let me take a look. Yeah, we should look at their sounding, because otherwise I'm just sitting here speculating on what's happening. And that's definitely not good if we're trying to learn here. So let me go to my soundings. Yeah, we'll bring up the, I think MFL, I'm not sure what that is. I think that might be Fort Lauderdale. or Miami, one of the two. I'm sure somebody will fill me in. But that's down there in South Florida, and this is what it looked like at 12Z. So that's 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. Eastern. This is in the morning hours. And you can see plenty of moisture there, about 3,000 or 4,000 feet deep. And I like to look at the mixing ratios labeled up here. These are the mixing ratio lines. And this is the best measure of moisture. You can use dew point, but mixing ratio is a value that's conserved no matter which way the parcel moves, and the values are in the 17 range. I'm kind of averaging that lower level right there, and that's pretty decent moisture there, 17 grams per kilogram. We don't get that often here in Texas. And you can see the atmosphere pretty uncapped there. There is what we call a Cape Robber structure. We call that a Cape Robber because back when we were chasing, when we would see these big inversions up in the mid and upper levels, that would cut down on your cape. So say we have a parcel ascent like that, and this area in between is the cape. This thing is going to take away from that. It's going to kind of make it kind of squashed together in here, so as a result you get less deep layer cape. But there's another measure called cape density. So when you have your convective lift like that and you're looking at the cape in this area, when it widens out rapidly with height like it's doing here, that's going to give you pretty good parcel accelerations once storms get going. So that's what we had today. We've got steep lapse rates from the surface up to about 14,000 feet, helping to get those storms going. Wind shear, or the actual wind field, is over here on the right side. Looks like only about 10 knots out of the south here. But all you need is a little bit of low-level backing, and that outflow boundary helped to supply that. Aloft, we have a little bit of mid-level winds, 25 knots there. And as you go up to the top of the chart, 65 knots up there at about 42,000 feet. That's within the troposphere. And that'll help ventilate the storms and help. You tend to get better organization, less precip falling in the updrafts. It develops structures that are more long-lived. So you don't have popcorn storms sitting there raining themselves out. You get better severe weather structures going. And as a result, you can see the photograph kind of stretched out a little bit and not piled up on top of the center of the chart. Okay, let's see. We were going to look at the rest of the radar. So there's our storm right there moving up into the northwest suburbs. We know that the boundary is down to the south. So basically the depth of that cool layer, probably a couple hundred feet in this area. I don't know how much of that it's ingesting, but that could provide a little bit of streamwise vorticity into that updraft. Assuming that the air below that layer is not too cool. You certainly don't want that. But we roll this forward. Now you can see the storm is developing some pretty impressive structures there. Definitely looking like a supercell with a classic hook. And then we go to the velocity values. And we're looking in this area right here. And we have to keep in mind the radar is down in this area. Well, what do we have? We've got, let me shrink this so we can look at the velocities. So these are going to be showing down here, and this is your maximum unambiguous velocity. That's determined by the volume coverage pattern, the VCP. Okay, so let's see, getting this back on track, there's our storm. What we see here is mostly a lot of outbound in this area right here and a little bit of inbound here. So not much going on at this point. But if we roll that forward, let's see what happens. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. The green is toward the radar. I got kind of screwed up there. Green toward the radar and red away. So let me back that up here. Okay, so flow toward the radar right there. And this is where we get that acceleration of probably the inflow into the updraft right there. This is probably close to the rain-free base. I'm going to put a dot right there. That's kind of the center of circulation, and you can see it kind of corresponds to the cusp of that hook right there. So your updraft base is basically going to be in this area right here. Might have a little bit of an Arcus cloud formation out ahead of this thing. And back in here, probably a wall cloud. So we don't have any good gate-to-gate shear at this point. This is about, this is not live. This is about 7:05 p.m. And we've got a width on this circulation, probably a couple miles there. And as we progress forward, it doesn't look like any strong, tight gate-to-gate circulation. Maybe in here. Yeah, see, that's coming together pretty good there. Probably about 30, 40 knots of shear. That's getting into the low end of possible tornado genesis. And that's kind of in this wraparound region right there. Probably difficult to spot the tornado there with the haze and the precipitation. This is about around 7:12 p.m. right there. And then as we move forward, we kind of lose that hook echo structure. And probably what's happening at this point is the storm is getting in the deeper air north of the outflow boundary, and that'll tend to disrupt the updrafts, and that's probably what's happening at this point. And probably some cell interaction with this other storm going up along the coast here in the Fort Lauderdale area. Let me roll this back and get in tune with the chat. You can see that tornado warning right there. Let's look at the tornado warning. Find the original one. Radar indicated rotation. I did check Twitter to look for any tornado shots, and I didn't see anything. I didn't even see any storm shots. So I'm not too sure what people saw in this thing. Let's see here. We got Ryan and Mark Sanchez is here. Ryan says he had drivers caught on the cell on I-75 that was tornado warned. Lightning was super intense with strikes occurring every 2 seconds. He could see the cell approaching, looking west from his office window building. Warehouse on the second floor, very powerful. More cells popping up on radar at this time. Justin is here. Alex Front. Robert Terrell. Justin asks, what was the source of the moisture for the central and north Texas rain today? Yeah, it could be a little bit of evapotranspiration from just the vegetation in general. Everything is very green across the U.S., and that does add a certain amount of moisture to the atmosphere. Also, all the crop irrigation. But the bulk of it is probably coming from the Gulf, and that makes its way into the inland areas. Not all of it is used up by convection, so that with the other sources of moisture, even coastal from the Atlantic working inland, because we're getting into kind of like an inland monsoon pattern with, let me switch charts here. So very strong heating in the inland areas compared to the coast. You're going to get kind of an onshore component, and you're going to get more and more moisture working inland. So we're just in the season where that happens there. Lots of sources of moisture. Ryan running GR Level 2 and radar scope. Funwood Tech is here. Eddie W. Kevin McKinney. Alex Front mentioning the drought in northern Indiana. kind of drought-like. That's a good idea. Let's see what the drought monitor is showing. I was looking at the Oroville flood. Do you remember that from February? Man, that was pretty crazy. California getting all those rains. I wonder how that's worked out over there since then. Drought monitor is pretty good for checking who's in trouble with precipitation, and looks like Florida. So I guess it's good they're getting some rain. Let me see if it's impacting. Looks like this is the main drought-stricken area, of course, according to that map. So today, not quite where they need it. Looks like southern Arizona and the Dakotas also in drought conditions. Ancient Astronaut is here, 70 degrees, 100% humidity at Canyon Lake, Texas. Ryan says Tamiami Trail at 40. I don't know what that 40 is. Ron Chalfant from Southern California, another 80-degree day at the 4,600-foot level. Ryan says more storm cells rotating as they push up into the metro area from the Everglades. Maybe I'll just go ahead and bring in live data from Miami. So I'm downloading radar data. If the stream does anything weird, it may be because of that. And Ryan says Fort Lauderdale is the Radioson site. People asking about confirmed tornadoes. Nothing confirmed. According to Ryan, upper rotation, wall cloud, rain wrapped. And as we saw on the radar, the tightest rotation that we saw was during a rain wrapped phase. Deadly lightning attack, yeah. Florida near the top of the, or maybe at the top of the records for annual lightning fatalities. Justin says, takes large hail or 60-mile-an-hour winds to trigger a tornado warning. Maybe a lightning alert should be developed. Oroville was nuts, followed that closely. Thomas Copeland and Ron Chalfant says, check YouTube Oroville videos, lots of good info on the dam. Yeah, there was some good aerial, I guess, drone footage of all that going on. Very amazing footage. Alex Nazinski, hi from Los Angeles. And Ron there in Lake Arrowhead. Okay, so let's see here. We'll get into the charts and see what's going on across the country. It's good to start with the hemispheric chart. This is something I mostly do in the wintertime, but this will show you the orientation of the jet, where all the major waves are. You can see we've got a long wave off the west coast right there, another long wave on the east coast, and it looks like we've got a long wave ridge in the central U.S. So that's helping to give a northwesterly component to the tropospheric flow in the east part of the country. And it tends to be southwest in the western U.S., so that's what's going on there. And this ridge right there, causing warm conditions for the Dakotas right there, all the way up to Manitoba. And if you want to see how hot it is, I'll bring up the surface analysis. This is current conditions here. And we're looking at Manitoba right here. This is Hudson Bay, and you can see 81 degrees almost all the way up to Hudson Bay right there. And this is the polar bear capital of Canada, so pretty unusual weather for that area. So warm advection on its way north, well up in Canada, probably a warm front up in this area right here. And on the other side, looks like we've got a new cold front coming through Saskatchewan right there, and that'll make its way into the Dakotas. Shift down into the Dakotas, and we can see that next front coming in right here. Very easy to pick out. Now that can be a source of moisture as these fronts come south. And the reason for that, let's say the front is working its way southward. Well, we tend to have an easterly component north of the front, so a lot of the high dew points that we often get in the Midwest, not right now, but when we have 70s and low 80s dew points out there in Iowa, this easterly component can work its way back westward north of these fronts and bring a lot of higher moisture into the Intermountain area. So we can see thunderstorms blowing up big time in western Colorado when that happens. So that's something we'll have to watch out for with this front here. Looks like another front working its way southward here. And that looks to be probably all the way down into Texas. So somewhere between, I don't know, let's see, I'm not too sure where to place that front because we got 90 degrees here in Kansas, and you have to go all the way up into Minnesota to find the 70s and 80s, so that's kind of a mystery there. It's basically a big cold air mass that's moving south and modifying, but I don't know, I would probably go with maybe a leading edge pretty far to the south. It's always safe to do that. Okay, to the other maps. Let's see here. Here's the 200 millibar analysis. I'm trying to bring up some new maps to kind of mix things up. This is above the 250 millibar level. This is up at about 40,000 feet, and this is showing 60 knot jet right there in South Texas. Looks like maybe a piece of the subtropical jet right here in the Florida area. So in the Keys, 60 miles an hour right there, and probably at other layers, there's probably some very rapid flow helping to sustain those storms there in the Miami area. So it looks like here a subtropical jet, and then another section of that here. Then up to the north, we've got the polar front jet. And out over New York, 110 knot winds. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but flight routing is dictated by upper level winds to a huge extent. So usually West Coast flights will run something like this, pretty much over Kansas and to LA. But when we have a pattern like this, they're going to bring them a little bit further south and then west like that. So that way they don't have as much of a headwind that would increase the flight time and the fuel consumption. So basically we've got the trough over Texas here from about, looks like St. Louis down to Dallas. So it is shifting gradually to the east, and we should see that out of the picture here. But that would increase precipitation chances for the southeast as that reaches that area. And then at 8:50, you can see the stronger flow from the Gulf, mostly focused on Mississippi and not so much on Texas. In fact, we're getting offshore flow here in Texas, so that's going to gradually start shutting precipitation down as the trough moves out of the area. And then a quick look at 925 there. A little bit of onshore flow here into Louisiana. And let's head to the satellite picture. This is the GO16 data. Looks like Colorado's active. Got some storms there just east of the Front Range on the high plains. And here we see all the thunderstorms associated with that trough over Texas. And off the edge is the Florida convection. It's already nighttime there, so not much to show. Okay, let's look at the thickness chart real quick. We were talking about a frontal system up there in Manitoba, and that would be it right there. And then the tail end, like that right there. So there's the tail end of that front, and that goes into Nevada. And then we pick up the next system right there. So it looks like maybe a weak front moving through the San Joaquin Valley into the Mojave Desert there. And then in the Midwest, we were talking about the front in this area. Definitely a cool air mass in the Great Lakes area. And I don't know, there could be a backdoor front through this area here around St. Louis. Or maybe a weaker front in Texas. And which one it is, I'm not really too sure. I'd have to look at some more products and maybe go back through the data to find trends and see if I can find like a wind shift and that kind of thing. And all this precip that we've had over the area, that's really messed things up. That kind of destroys the continuity of the wind field and the temperature and the dew points. So let's see here. It does look like there is a baroclinic low in New York and a bit of a warm front through that area, and then the cold front through that area looking something like that. So definitely a frontal system moving through the northeast U.S. into Massachusetts right there. Okay, taking a look at the chat. Ryan says there was a confirmed fatality lightning strike in Davie, Florida this evening. Justin says, always interesting to know, even things like laying on concrete garage floors, working on cars can be dangerous during lightning. Justin says about every 6 to 8 years, they lose 5 to 10 cows from lightning events. Yeah, and that, the problem with those four-legged animals, you know, their feet are about 2 or 3 feet apart, maybe 4 feet, and that voltage differential on the ground can be lethal. So that's why they tell you if you're caught out with lightning, try to bring your legs together so you don't have that problem there. And, of course, stay low. And all right, let's see here. Something I was going to show you was a quick mini lesson on boundary layer, on the boundary layer. So let's take a look at Fort Worth. That was the sounding for this morning. I'm going to go out to an area that hasn't had precip, maybe to Dodge City. And you'll notice this little inversion. See that right there? This is this morning. So basically this, for those of you not familiar with soundings, this is the temperature line, and this other line is the dew point, or the moisture line. Okay? So what this is showing us is that there's some cool air at the ground, and then just above the ground, maybe 500 feet up, temperature rises rapidly from about 16 Celsius, about 61 Fahrenheit, all the way up to about 70 Fahrenheit. So think about that. What might be causing that? Well, it's 7 in the morning, and it's probably been kind of a clear evening there. There's been cooling. Temperatures very cool near the ground. And what you're doing is you're radiating long wave radiation into space, and that cools the air mass in contact with the ground. So what happens is you develop a cool layer right at the ground, and that gradually deepens as the night goes on, and that forms a radiation inversion, what you see right here. So that's what you're left with in the morning. And I've got another graphic to kind of show you this. Yeah, so this, let me bring this up in a different program here so I can draw on it. Okay, so this is basically a time chart. So left to right is time, and then the y-axis is height. So this right here is the ground. So early in the morning, sunrise, 12Z, you're at about this point right here. So in the lowest part of the atmosphere, you've got this cool boundary layer. So this is cooled by the nighttime cooling, and then above that, this is the leftovers from the previous night. That's up at about 1,000 to 2,000 feet. So that cool air deepens with height, and that forms a radiational inversion. And then as soon as the sun hits that, you get warming, and then you develop a mixed layer that grows with height during the morning hours. And you develop cumulus and all that. And this mixed layer, I can show you a picture of that real quick. Yeah, this is a photo out of an airplane window, and this shows you the probably about 4,000 feet thick, showing the mixed layer. Beneath that, you've got some humid air and the cumulus forming right there. And above that, you have what we call the free atmosphere. So what you're going to see there is, let me see if I can bring up a sounding. Yeah, so right here, that's the radiation inversion. This kind of recaps everything, and above that, this is the residual layer. And then pretty much anything up in this area, this is what we refer to as the free atmosphere. So when we talk about thunderstorms developing in the LFC, level of free convection, that's the height at which a rising parcel breaks through the cap. We'll pretend that that's a capping inversion. And when the thunderstorm goes up into that free atmosphere, that level right there is the LFC, level of free convection. And that whole area up there contributes to the CAPE of the atmosphere. So basically, the cooler the free atmosphere up there, the more CAPE you're going to get out of the thunderstorm situation. So that's why it's very important to have cooling in the mid and upper levels in a storm situation. So we look for sources of upper level lift when we're talking about troughs moving in. Quasi-geostrophic disturbances, those will create forcing in the atmosphere that cools the atmosphere adiabatically. So basically you're moving the atmosphere along these lines, and you tend to develop these layers up here pretty early, and that causes a very cool pattern in the upper parts of the troposphere, whereas down here this remains warm. So basically you increase the lapse rates as these disturbances come into your thunderstorm area. Okay, let's take a look at the forecast here. Let's see, where are we at? For Texas, we're going to be seeing the precipitation pretty much ending. I think it's going to stay pretty dry here. So the animation overnight just shows things shutting down. This is about 3, 4 in the morning, and it looks like we're pretty much clear. We've got high pressure moving in from the north, and we're just going to see kind of a drying trend in this area. And then this time of year, I like to look at dew points. Okay, so this is the GFS dew point. And let's see here. You can see the northerly flow here in Texas, and even more cool air coming in from the Hudson Bay area. That Hudson Bay pretty much just wrecked chasing, pumping a lot of cool air southward. And let's see here. Let's see what happens over the next few days. When we do the forecast tomorrow, good grief, is it Monday already? Yeah, it is. Okay. Tuesday, let's see. Tomorrow when we do the forecast, it's going to be looking like this. Ridging coming into Texas and the central U.S. See that pressure gradient, the lines pretty packed in here. So you're going to get a pretty strong northerly wind, and that's going to tend to dry things out. Even evapotranspiration is not going to affect that too much. That's going to kind of overcome that to a certain extent. But out in the Gulf, looks like we have a baroclinic system coming together. So maybe that front I was talking about over Texas, maybe that's important, because that's helping to create a baroclinic zone that helps this low. So when we do the forecast tomorrow night, maybe looking for a low in the New Orleans area right there. And with these 70s dew points, the purple, that's probably going to be a potent source of potent area of precipitation. So this whole area troughing and low pressure right there in the southern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia area. So when we go into Wednesday, it's going to be looking like this: low pressure south of South Carolina and some sort of front coming into Florida right there. So we're probably going to see some thunderstorm activity there during the afternoon hours. High pressure covering the Great Lakes, bringing this modified cool air southward. Then out to the west, doesn't look like much going on really out there. Looks pretty quiet, low pressure in the inland areas. I wonder if that's a thermal low in that area. But definitely pretty dry, very low dew points there. Then moving into Friday, let's skip on to Friday. Yeah, we're seeing return flow developing on the plains. So we're going to see a transition to a little bit of a springtime pattern. This is Friday afternoon. Pretty deep southerly flow from Texas up to the Great Plains, and the development of a dry line along the Cap Rock up into western Nebraska. So some possible chase targets forming up there on the high plains, maybe in this area. And then, of course, in Florida, it looks like some sort of stationary front. And the mesoscale patterns are going to be pretty important at this point. Basically, that's where the thunderstorm complexes lay down boundaries. That's pretty hard to predict this far out, but it does look like there's plenty of mechanisms in there to produce thunderstorms in Florida. So it looks wet there. It may break the drought there in the central Florida area. For Saturday, looking like this. Looks like a low pressure area in western Nebraska. Dry line into the Cap Rock area right there. And then looks like some sort of front in the Dakotas. Maybe a baroclinic low right there around the Fargo area. So possible severe weather there in the Fargo area into northwestern Minnesota. And then back into Alberta, it looks like an occluded low in that area. Pretty strong onshore component coming into California. So that's usually what we see during the summertime. Then going into Sunday, looking like this here. Cyclogenesis in northwestern or northeastern Colorado will probably be augmented by strong heating. Dry line will be a very prominent pattern there along the Cap Rock. So probably a bit of chasing somewhere up and down that dry line. And of course, along the boundaries, probably some targets in that area. It looks like that pattern will pretty much persist through next week. Don't see much change here. It looks like maybe a little bit of strengthening of the cool air coming out of Canada. That pushes into the Midwest and into Arkansas and Texas by Wednesday. And definitely no shortage of moisture here in Texas. You see these 70s dew points coming up here. And look like it even try to bring some 80s there in northeast Texas. And you can see definite boundary in this area right here. So looks like probably some severe weather at some point Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. Looks like the dry line kind of becomes reestablished later in the week. And we're getting out to about the 17th and 18th. Does look active on the plains. And I just caught this out in the southeast corner here. Looks like some sort of low off the Carolinas coast. Looks like maybe some sort of tropical disturbance or something coming up from that area. Central pressure, 1005 millibars. That goes right over Florida around the 18th. So we'll keep an eye on that area and see what comes up from there. Okay, let's see here. I didn't get my closing music set up. I've been kind of busy with stuff, so let me do that real quick. Get that queued up here. Give me just a second here, get the level set. I had like 15 windows open here earlier trying to get things going. And let's see here. Ryan there is saying Tuesday and Wednesday looks more intense for him. Yeah, certainly as that front makes its way into that area. Forecast looking pretty good for severe weather again. And he says the severe cells will pop up south of the boundary of that front. Yeah, pretty much agree with that. Let's see, I'm going back to my music again. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, I just had to cue that up. All right, let me look through the rest of the chat right there. Don't want to miss too much. Carl says he had to cover a wood pile during a storm when the wind blew his tarp off. Positive CG barrage, ducking constantly. And Ryan says next time he'll video and audio tape a severe weather attack and send it. Yeah, I would appreciate that. We're kind of short on multimedia here, so if you want to send anything, definitely do that. I finally caught up with my email. For the most part, I'm down to maybe 10 or 15 messages, so I'm going to try to finish those off tonight and get working on digital atmosphere in the next book, and I'll show you guys some of that as that progresses. Mick says he's off to watch Weather Brains. Awesome. Okay, appreciate you joining. And Alex says just sing. And Alex Fred started to look more active. Okay, that's about all for me. We'll see you all next tomorrow. And have a good evening. Take care.